everybody. Thank you for tuning in to Ex Post Watcho. My name is Jason. I am joined, as always, by my friend
Ilana.
Today is a big day because we are watching a big movie, and that movie is Blade Runner. Ilana, have you ever seen Blade Runner?
No.
What?
I have no idea. Like, I know it's a big deal. I know people freak out over this movie. I actually have no idea what it's about. I don't even know who's in this. Okay, is this Harrison Ford?
Yes.
Okay. That's all I know.
Okay, I don't want to spoil the movie or get too much into specifics, so I'll try and be a little vague. But Blade Runner is a really famous, highly regarded movie for a bunch of reasons, and I think in certain ways you will be very impressed by it. I think you'll hopefully enjoy it. It's kind of an interesting movie because we chatted about this maybe about a month ago, and I threw out Blade Runner, and you said something about how, like, well, we had done kind of action-y movies recently, and, like, you know, let's not maybe do another one. And here's the secret of Blade Runner. It's not an action movie. It's fucking boring. It's a boring ass movie. There is some action in it, but when it came out, it didn't do very well because it looks like it's Harrison Ford fresh off of Star Wars in this like sci-fi movie. The poster, he's got a gun. He looks really cool. It's got a cool font. So people were really excited about it, but it came out and didn't really blow people away. It didn't do big numbers. Budget of $30 million, made $41 million at the box office.
Oh.
But in the years since, it has developed a huge following, and a lot of people love it for what it is. And it's basically like the critique people make of Blade Runner is that, like, well, one, if you go in expecting some kind of sci-fi action movie, you will be disappointed. It is a sci-fi movie. It's a really well done sci-fi movie, but it's more about, it really is the style, the visuals, the music. It has an amazing soundtrack that's like synthesizer based, very, very highly regarded. And it's a detective movie. That's what it is. It is film noir. Harrison Ford is the down on his luck detective who has to go solve a big case, and it's going to be a hard time for him. And he does it in the sci-fi future. So it's cool to look at and listen to.
I feel like I've avoided Blade Runner because I'm not really a sci-fi person when it is sci-fi action. So everything you've just told me, I was expecting a sci-fi action film, but I don't think I will be disappointed. I think I'm going to like it more than I originally maybe thought based on your description of it, to be honest. And I do really like Harrison Ford. I think he's great to watch.
Yeah, this is great 80s handsome young Harrison Ford. This movie had a lot of different versions. It's kind of famous for that as well. So when this first came out in theaters, before they released it, the studio was like, I don't know if it's because they didn't think people would understand the plot or they just felt the need to do something, but they made Harrison Ford do voiceover dialogue, like narrating the film. And it's famously bad. He just like mails it in because he didn't want to do it. So he's just like, I was walking down the block. Just like you've heard Harrison Ford do an interview as a 60-year-old man, a 70-year-old man, where he just like doesn't give a fuck. It's kind of that, but like young Harrison Ford bringing that attitude to a voiceover. So that's what the theatrical cut had. Then in the early 90s, they released the director's cut, which was the canonical version for a really long time, that got rid of the voiceover dialogue, and I don't know what else they did. There's a bunch of little details that we'll get into in the other part about, like, they added this. What does that mean? And then in 2007, they released the version we're going to watch, which is called the Final Cut. And this one is the most Ridley Scott approved version. I think with the director's cut, he had input, but he didn't really have full control. It was kind of like maybe at a little bit arm's length for him, but it was like a drastic improvement from the original.
Sorry, Ridley Scott directed this?
Yes.
But Ridley Scott did not have full approval of the director's cut.
Yeah, the 1992 director's cut, that's 10 years after it first came out. I don't know the specifics, but like it wasn't quite like, here's all the footage, you go redo the movie as you please. I think it was like they were able to get some things taken out and put back in. And he signed off on it enough that it was labeled the director's cut. But the 2007 version, this is the Ridley Scott director's cut. They just can't call it the director's cut again because everybody knows that version. So it's the final cut. I actually haven't seen that one, but from what I've seen, I don't think it's a huge departure from the previous one. So
well, there's got to be only so much that they filmed that they're gonna pull in and out of the movie.
Yeah, unless you go all George Lucas and start adding stuff in with computers, which thank God that hasn't happened. In 2000, Harrison Ford, this is from Wikipedia, Harrison Ford gave his view on the director's cut of the film where he said that although he thought it was spectacular, it didn't move him at all. He gave a brief reason. They haven't put anything in, so it's still an exercise in design. So that's kind of like, I think that is the critique of Blade Runner. I think it is, it's got a little bit more than that. Like, I think it does bring style, but there is a certain amount of substance to it. There's themes. They're very obvious what they are. But I think that makes it nice to watch.
I'm excited.
Yeah, I'm dangerously hyping you up for this movie. I think you'll enjoy it. It's definitely one of those like ones that you got to see at some point. So,
yeah, I think it's been on my list for years and years and years. But I think I think I just avoided it because I was like, I don't want to watch an action movie. It's not really my thing. But now hearing what I've heard, I'm quite interested. Plus, like I said, Harrison Ford, he could do just a piece of shit movie and it's going to be okay because you're watching Harrison Ford.
Yeah. Moody Harrison Ford.
Ooh, yeah.
All right. Let's go watch Blade Runner.
All right.
We're back. We did it. You've accomplished the task of finally watching Blade Runner. Lana, what'd you think? What'd you think of Blade Runner?
I have so many different thoughts about Blade Runner. I just watched it last night and this afternoon. I watched it in 2 parts. Last night was a bit of a slog getting through the first half. I have to admit, and you were not joking when you said this movie is boring. But I usually like, quote, boring movies. So I really didn't think I would actually be bored, but I was. So I stopped as soon as Roy found Daddy, and I watched the second part of it this afternoon, and I really, really enjoyed it or appreciated it in a way that I didn't when I was watching the first part of it last night. Then I was like, maybe I was just in a mood. So I went back and tried to rewatch the first half. Nope. Wasn't interested. I got through about 15 minutes and was like, I just don't think I really enjoyed watching this movie. I wanted to like this movie more than I did. I feel like as a film lover, anytime someone would find out that I hadn't seen Blade Runner, they were like, what's wrong with you? You got to watch it. It's like one of the greats. It's so good. And I'm glad I watched it. I appreciate so much about this movie. There's actually, I read an article, a Screen Crush article by Matt Singer from 2017. And the quote of his that really sums up my experience was, I find Blade Runner an easy film to admire and a tough one to like. So there are things I really appreciate, and objectively, I think it's a well-made movie. There's no denying that. But did I enjoy watching it? Did I like it? I don't know. Maybe the second part. So in long, that's how my experience was. How was your reviewing of this movie?
It was a pleasure as always, because I find it easy to love this movie, but I completely understand why people wouldn't. Like, that quote makes complete sense to me. Yeah, overall, I think this movie is a bunch of things. There's the visual part of it, both the cinematography, the way it's put together, as well as the aesthetic of it, like what they've actually done with science fiction and kind of cyberpunk. I think this is considered one of the people don't necessarily call Blade Runner cyberpunk a lot. Maybe they do and I just don't hear it, but it really kind of is like influential in that sense. I think the critique a lot of people have of it is that it's style over substance. Like it's basically a style piece. It's like great music, great visuals, great atmosphere, but it's a bit boring. The plot maybe isn't all that interesting or engaging. And but I think I personally do find like just the whole package brings enough that it's always enjoyable to me, and it's a mood. The movie is a mood. Like I know that it really does help. Like, okay, part of me wants to say let's pause this podcast and then you should go watch Blade Runner 4 more times. And then I think you'll be in the right headspace to appreciate Blade Runner. But that actually is kind of true in that I think it helps to know exactly what the movie is going into it, knowing like the first half, like not a lot happens. It's just set up. But I still love that section because it's just you're in the world of Blade Runner and you're looking at the flying cars and the city and moody Harrison Ford, and it's raining all the time and there's light shining in all the windows. Like everything, the whole package, I just enjoy experiencing it the whole time. And then definitely kind of towards the second half, the plot picks up a little bit more. And I think that's when Rutger Hauer shows up more, which helps a lot. Like that really kind of elevates the movie quite a bit. So I love this movie. I can't get enough of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it is set up with a very cool premise, which I did not realize until I was trying to figure out what I felt about this movie and did a little bit of research this afternoon, that it is actually based on the Philip K. Dick book, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? I had no idea because I have not read that book. And I think I get what you're saying. I think for me, I'm not a big sci-fi fan. So like the visuals, I agree. Like the cinematography, beautiful. Production design, art design, sound design. Like I think always like Ridley Scott pulls together an amazing team and has so much to appreciate in that sense. The design and production value are clearly top notch, especially for 1982. I was really impressed with what I was seeing. I think it's that thing of like very practical sort of sets as well. There wasn't, from what I know so far, not a lot of computer generated images or things like that, especially compared to other sci-fi movies that can make them look cheap or cheesy. This didn't seem that way at all. Actually, one of the first things I did was I paused the movie and I Googled Christopher Nolan Dark Knight trilogy Blade Runner influence, which turns out there certainly was influence, but like this movie obviously influenced a lot of filmmakers in a lot of different ways. I do appreciate that, but I just was like not super excited because in terms of the substance of the story, okay, I missed like a very important plot point, which is that these things only live for 4 years. And I don't know, I looked down at my noodles too long and I completely missed that. And I was like, what are the stakes here? Like, why the fuck are these replicants even here? And the stakes seemed so low, even knowing they only live 4 years. I was like, I want to see the actual script and how long it was. How much dialogue was actually
like 4
written
pages
down for this movie? Yeah. Like I said, I usually enjoy a kind of a slow burn, but I think because the characters, until Rutger Hauer, Roy. First of all, let me just get this out of the way. Roy is not the name for a badass killing machine. Roy is the guy who lives at the end of the street. Maybe he owned a ranch at some point, but his old bones can't keep up anymore, so he moved into town to be, frankly, closer to the pharmacy. He maybe goes fly fishing on the weekends, and everyone knows he gives out the best Halloween candy. That's a Roy.
He doesn't crush skulls with his bare hands.
Exactly. So that took me out a little bit. I realized this was 1982, but like, I was hoping it needed something biblical, especially with the themes of this movie and heaven and hell and angels. I was like, his name should be fucking Gabriel, at least fucking Samson, something that's gonna like put us in that headspace. I get it, 1982, but okay, so now that that's out of the way, yeah, I didn't really care about any of these characters. So I had a hard time really investing in the story because I didn't feel anything was really at stake. So I think I haven't read a ton yet because like I did just finish the movie this afternoon, and I think you're right. I probably need to watch it several more times to fully appreciate what I saw. But from my perspective, that's what people are talking about. It just doesn't seem like there's enough at stake to justify anything that is happening, for me anyway.
Yeah, that's interesting because that detail I saw in your notes that you discovered after the fact, the 4-year lifespan part, that is a crucial detail to everything in the movie. because to me, that is what actually makes, even though it's maybe a slow burn and there's not a ton of dialogue and you don't see a lot of these characters. Some of them you really only see, like Zora, you see her for 10 minutes total,
Right.
But that is the driving part of the movie because it's about the quest for survival and for freedom, at least for those characters. Especially towards the end scene. I don't know if you picked up on this, but like Roy Batty is like at the very end of his lifespan, his 4-year lifespan. He is literally dying in that final scene where he's chasing Deckard around.
Oh yes.
Yeah. But I think like this is one of my things about this movie is like Roy Batty is just like an amazing character, both the performance, but also I think the character itself, because he's played, Rutger Hauer plays him so menacingly, but also kind of like charmingly at the same time. Like he's kind of psychopathic, I guess, in his characteristics, but really sympathetically, especially at the very end. I mean, it's just like you see him die after sparing Deckard's life. And that kind of, I guess, like that journey, that contrast, the horrible things he's done to get there. They murdered all those people on a ship, I guess, to get to Earth. And the things he's done, he kills like 3 people in this movie as well. Like that to me makes that ending kind of like so profound and really connect with me. And even the other characters too, like they escape. I think 6 of them escape, but there's 4 of them in this movie. So like 2 of them have already died. They have to get jobs to survive. Like these are just like human bodies, workers on this like dystopian planet that apparently everyone is like vacated to go to space for one reason or another. So they're really just kind of grinding to get by and to survive, and they are the antagonists, but also just incredibly sympathetic on that level itself. So I think that's why that detail and that driving part of the plot, like why that's happening is really important, I think, to appreciating the movie, because it makes me, when I watch it again, all those scenes where Roy is like a vicious villain, I know that he's dying and he's terrified and he's just trying to survive.
Yeah, I agree with you. Rutger Hauer was the best thing for me about this movie, hands down. The first time we see him, he looks bananas, and I was like, oh yes, what's coming? Like I was super intrigued, and he did not disappoint, and he took me on a journey, that's for sure. I see all of that with his performance. I think the other replicants are not fleshed out enough for me to really feel that sympathy for them. I liked them. I especially liked, I don't know Daryl Hannah's character's name. Chris. I really liked that character as well. She was super interesting, but I felt she was more predatory and more calculating. So and we didn't quite see the same emotional journey from her as we did with Roy. So I wasn't really connected with her, but I agree in terms of Roy. Like, that is when this, like I said, the movie really started to interest me, was when he shows up and asks for, at that point I said, oh, that's why they're here. Oh, he needs more time. I didn't realize it was like, you know, the rest of the day or whatever it was. But that's when I really connected with this story and invested in this character. And it's interesting because you're kind of invested in these replicants, but you're also maybe supposed to be invested in Deckard. I'm going to just call him Dickard because he's for sure a dick. Hated him by the end of the movie. And I don't think he's very sympathetic as a character. And there were parts where I was like, oh, I hate this guy. This guy's awful. But he's set up as our hero or anti-hero. But I think at the end, he's not even an anti-hero. He's just like a jerk that we've seen this story through.
Happen to.
Yeah. I will say I love Harrison Ford. He's just like the ultimate aloof, curmudgeon-y, cool guy. He plays everything so well. I really enjoy, it's not that I didn't enjoy his performance, his character just like it. I liked the complexity that they added with his character, as with so little. There's a lot going on there. So I did appreciate that.
Yeah, when it comes to the other replicants, like you don't really get to know them that well. But I think they all do connect with me in a few different ways, or I think that's okay for a few different ways. One is like, I don't know if this is a factor of like the world building or the performances or what, but towards later in the movie, when it's just Rutger Hauer and Daryl Hannah's characters left, he says like, we're the only two left. And there's this like, it's this really sad kind of brief moment between them. And I do feel it I believe the characters that they have escaped from this other planet, and now it's just the four of them on this like kind of hopeless mission to try and save their lives. So even though you don't see maybe a lot of character development from any of them because there's like no time for it, I still just kind of believe them as what they are and are sympathetic to it. I think one other thing is technically these are robots and they have like different personalities like programmed into them. And they point out that like Leon, the big dude with the mustache, is like, he's a worker robot. Like his job is to do like manual labor. And then the two women are both, there's like Rutger Hauer is like a super genius A+ level intelligence, and they on the screen it showed like B level intelligence. So like they are programmatically like not as smart, I guess, you know? So like I think because like Leon's personality, like he just seems very like, I don't know, like he just would have a big stick that he would bonk you with or something like that. Like he doesn't seem like a very an intelligent guy, you know? And
yeah, he's not very sophisticated or there's no elegance about him.
Exactly. Yeah. So that part of that I think might be kind of maybe the actual nature of the characters and what they're supposed to be. But I think like the fact that you don't see a lot of these characters, and the same applies to Deckard. I mean, Deckard does go on way more of like a character development journey throughout the movie, but you don't really know what his life is or what his story is. Like they don't give you any, they do give you some details through like the set and his behavior. You can kind of like make some sort of assumptions, but you don't really know for sure. And he still works though, because he just works. Like he does the performance so well, and they just have him being a certain kind of guy that you just believe this guy is this like, he's done this job forever and he's sick of it, and he kind of gets dragged into this situation. And another thing that's interesting is the relationship between Deckard and the replicants, and who is the hero and who is the antagonist, you know, because you could easily flip it and like be like, Roy Batty is the hero, he's trying to save his life, and then Deckard is this cop trying to kill him, but he's like, he got dragged into the situation. Like I don't think he's particularly passionate about the job he's doing. He just has to do it. Yeah. Yeah,
I was a little confused. So like in one of the first scenes, he's approached and they're like, oh, you're a Blade Runner. You're under arrest. And I I was like, what? I thought Blade Runner was supposed to be like, quote unquote, the good guys. And then obviously we get to the precinct, the whatever, which, by the way, I love the noodles to go that Harrison Ford
mowing
had
down on
the
noodles
way.
in the flying car.
Yeah. And the, I don't know, the chief, the captain, the whatever is like, oh, I knew you wouldn't come if I just asked you. So like, how is this operation functioning? Like, is he just like a mercenary? Like, is he just like, oh, the highest bidder, he'll do this work because he's the best guy? Like, is he at retirement age in this world? Are they just trying to set up that, oh, he's kind of a rogue, he's kind of a rebel? I was a bit confused it was like, I don't know. Just from that, also that guy kept saying skin jobs, correct? Is that what he called them?
He did.
That is obviously a very sexually, it sounds sexual and really upset me every time I heard it. That's just a little side note for how I felt. That stirred up some uncomfortable feelings when I kept hearing skin jobs. It sounds so gross. I hate it. Anyway.
That term, when I heard it, it sounded like a slur. Like it sounds like it's a pejorative. I mean, it's obviously a pejorative the way he's using it, but it sounds sounds kind of fucked up and racist. So, fun trivia fact: the narrated version of this film, the theatrical release, they have Deckard dropping a line there where he basically says he called the replicants skin jobs. He's the kind of cop who would have called a black man an N-word. And then he actually says the N-word, which means we have to cancel Harrison Ford. I'm sorry. But it was just like the most unsubtle. That's the problem with that track, is that like, oh, okay, thank you for explaining to me that the word he used that is obviously a pejorative might serve that function. In terms of him like going to the police station, my interpretation of events is that like Harrison Ford was a cop doing a particular type of cop called a Blade Runner. I don't know what it means that he retired. He maybe just quit. Like I don't think he necessarily likes the job. He gets the shit kicked out of him throughout this entire movie. Like it's not a great job. I don't think he's particularly respected. But they need him. And I think like, yeah, that scene is them saying, they're just bringing him in to say like, we got this work for you to do. And he says like, I quit. I don't want to do this. And the cop says, hey, you know what it is? If you're not cops, you're little people. So the implication there is that they have some kind of leverage over him. Like this is a dystopian future where the police have a lot of power. But that, you know, like there is
unimaginable.
Yeah. But there is something to their leverage over him. Like they clearly can bully him into going back and doing this one job, which is like, again, the detective thing. It's like this reluctant shit. I got to do this. I got dragged into this mess thing. Yeah.
It sounds like it should be captivating, but God, one of my notes was just, I'm so fucking bored.
So the scene after that, they're in a small room watching the TV screen, showing the pictures of the different replicants and their descriptions and stuff like that. That's the scene where he says, for your lifespan. Like he explains it right there. So
yeah, I think I literally just looked down at my bowl of noodles too long and was like thinking about like my sauce to noodle ratio maybe more than I was invested in the movie at that point.
Were you eating noodles while you watched Harrison Ford in his car eating noodles?
I was.
That's nice.
Yeah. That did help connect me to the story a little bit more.
He's just like me. What did you think of Gaff? Gaff is the character played by I'm so bad at names here. Edward James Olmos from Battlestar Galactica. Who he had the stick and the bow ties and the hats and the dope ass outfits.
When he first showed up, I was like, oh, cool. Where's this going? And then he just kind of went away for most of the movie and then kind of came back at the end and was like, huh. And I was like, why was he in the movie? What's the point? He was fine.
I think, like, again, this episode is going to be me explaining why Blade Runner is a good movie. Just like, here's why you're not understanding why all of this is fantastic. But I like him because, like, I don't actually know what the fuck his job is. Like, it's not really explained. He works with or for the police, and he just shows up throughout this movie, kind of supervising Deckard. Like, he shows up at the beginning, brings him into the police station. When Deckard investigates Leon's apartment, he's there too. Then there's like 2 or 3 more times where like Deckard gets beat up, like after the Zora scene. And right at the very end, like he shows up. He's like, hey, you know. So one of the things, and we'll have to talk about this at some point, is Deckard a replicant, idea. He's part of that because the theory is if Deckard is a replicant, then this guy is kind of like keeping an eye on him. So that's why he's showing up in all these places. Like Deckard's job is to go out and do the dirty work and get his ass kicked and stuff like that on behalf of the police. And this guy's kind of like, he's like the project manager in charge of the situation. So he's just like checking in like, hey, can I help unblock you somehow?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. We'll have to talk about it when we're talking about is Deckard a replicant or not. But I understand what you're saying. I appreciate it. I just didn't care for it or about it.
Yeah, again, like that's the thing about this movie that works for me is that I like the fact that I don't totally understand what this character is. He's kind of ambiguous. So that makes him just sort of interesting. Like I don't really know what this fucking relationship is or how his job works. Like sometimes when you don't explain things, it can be more interesting.
I totally agree to a point. I just felt like there were so many ambiguous things about this movie that there was nothing for me to really hold on to until Roy.
Yeah. So after getting assigned the case he doesn't want by the police, Deckard is sent to the Tyrell Corporation to go talk to the boss man there and test his Voight Kampf machine. That's the name for that cool gadget they got that tells if you're a robot or not. So they fly into the giant pyramid in the middle of the city, again giving us some just like amazing shots of miniatures and sci-fi future and cool flying cars. And then he meets Rachel and gives her the test and quickly learns that she is a replicant and she doesn't know it.
Quickly? Didn't they say he had to ask her over 100 questions?
Yes.
How quick could that be?
Well, yeah, you're right. That is actually like the point of her. Normally it takes like 20 or 30 questions and it took 100 questions with her. So yeah, quickly movie time, I guess. Like they sort of do a little transition-y thing that makes it take about a minute. So what'd you think of Rachel?
So I liked Rachel. Rachel actually reminds me a lot of Rachel Lee Cook, like Sean Young, which really like stood out to me in this movie. I kept seeing Rachel Lee Cook. That's just another pointless note of mine. But I liked her. I thought it was interesting, like this question of is she a replicant or not? Even like when we first meet her. And then I felt like I was questioning it as time went on just because of the nature of the storyline and is he a replicant? One moment I literally was like, oh my God, they have a weird relationship. The first time they were getting kind of maybe possibly romantic, I was like, oh my God, is he going to have sex with like a robot? And then as the movie went on, I became horrified by their relationship. I think there's not enough of this relationship for me to also care about the relationship, but I thought it was interesting and the power dynamics were really interesting. And I could probably talk for like a whole hour about how complicated that relationship is when we look at power dynamics and what it implies in terms of are you a replicant or not versus 1982 perspective versus a 2020 perspective. I found it interesting. Rachel's mostly collars as well. She has got some intense wardrobe happening in this movie.
Yeah, this movie, I think us having watched Dracula a couple weeks ago and then and let me just say, we did not talk about the costumes enough in Dracula. Mostly, I'll say because I didn't really like cotton on to it for the most part. Afterward, I went and watched a documentary about it and like explaining all the different outfits, and I was like 10 times more impressed. But that really primed me to be like looking at outfits in this movie, and there's so many good distinctive outfits. And yeah, her whole thing is like she's got like these big massive fur jackets, like, And then they've got these big ass collars. And then when she's not wearing the giant jacket, she's got these like huge shoulder pad, like dresses that look kind of like ridiculous, but totally great at the same time. And I guess like when this was made, this is early 80s. I don't know when the era of like the woman power suit with the giant shoulder pads was, but this might have been around that time. Like they might have been extrapolating. What if the shoulder pads got even bigger?
Yeah, I agree. It really worked. What are your thoughts on Rachel and also Rachel and Deckard's relationship? I'm curious.
Yeah. So, how do I do this without getting myself in trouble? I think, and I've spent a week like preparing for this. I think okay. So, I like their relationship. Like, I actually think it's a really important part of the movie. I think so. There's a scene where Deckard basically kind of almost pulls the Louis C.K. blocking the doorway move when she tries to leave, and then gets basically maybe consent is not totally there in what happens to start their physical relationship. I think that even if that is wrong, if you see that and think like this is wrong, what he's doing is wrong, he's a bad guy, I still think that is the right thing for the movie. I think it's the right thing for the character, and I think Deckard as a guy, he is kind of a dick, like he's not, you don't see anything to get the impression he's like a caring person or a good person.
Totally.
But I think their relationship actually is kind of like he really does like love her, much to his chagrin, because like so he finds out she's a replicant. She shows up at his apartment like the next day or something like that, and she's like, "Oh fuck, I'm a replicant." And then he very kind of cruelly just like is like, "Yeah, you're a replicant." Like he gives examples. He kind of proves it to her by pointing out two of her memories. And you remember this and you remember that. The horrifying story about the spider with the eggs. I love that detail. Actually, I love that that's the story used as a memory, because it's such a like fucked up thing that you would have stuck in your head as a kid. But he's really, he's kind of mean about it. And then she starts crying, which immediately is like, that's like fucking kryptonite to a man. You're like, I'm sorry. And this is maybe the really controversial part. The later scene where she's at his apartment and he's basically like forcing her to say like, "I want you to kiss me. I want to be made love to." He kind of is like, sort of like asserting her humanity in a way. Like that is the way I sort of interpret that, is like,
right.
And because she's really like going through an incredibly traumatic, tragic event, like imagine getting that news that like actually none of your life is real, it's all bullshit. And I presume she's also got the 4-year lifespan, although they never really say whether that's the case. So yeah, the fact that the relationship is problematic, I think it's the right thing for the older detective character and this younger woman, and they both kind of get wrapped up in this circumstance that has happened, and he, it goes from being cynical about it and to maybe being a bit redemptive, like he literally runs away with her at the end. So yeah, I like that relationship a lot, just as a part of the movie. I think it brings something to Deckard and kind of his change, I guess, as a person.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Like, I do think it's hard to watch as a woman, and it's like uncomfortable. Well, from me as a woman, I can't speak for all women, obviously. But I do think it's important. And I think that's why I could like talk for days about that. In particular, that scene where he prevents her from going and forces her to consent. Is that, it's a very interesting dynamic that they have. I don't know that I agree that he loves her. I don't feel that from this. I feel like that question of, is he a human or is he a replicant, kind of comes into play with that and sort of pokes at that question. I think that she is this beautiful thing in this very ugly, dark world that maybe he's putting on a pedestal or using, if I'm being frank, to bring something like pleasurable into his life and for support in a way. I don't know that I saw that there was any genuine love there. But again, I think it's a really interesting thing. And it was kind of like I was simultaneously like turned on by their relationship and also like horrified. Like there are some like sexy moments that are, or like romantic moments. And I was like, Harrison Ford, like kiss me like that, Harrison Ford. But then I was like, oh God, I don't like that he's doing that to her right now. Yeah. Yeah, I do like the complexity of it. I don't think that there's quite enough of it in terms of, again, like being able to really connect with them. That's just going to be a common theme for me through all of this, really. But I think she's an important part of the story. At first, I didn't like her. I don't know why.
She's a bit wooden, kind of her personality,
right.
Like especially early on. She's just like, just kind of walks in, just kind of a little stone faced, little dead eyed, I guess.
Not like Liz Hurley wooden, but like intentionally wooden.
Liz Hurley would have knocked this out of the park.
Oh yeah. Well, that's another podcast. We can debate that.
That'll be my stunt recast for the remake. I think for their relationship, the things that make me kind of buy it as real love, certainly towards the end, like when he has survived the thing with Roy and he comes home and he's like, she's laying there in the bed and he's like terrified she's dead. Like he's just like freaking out. And then he puts his head up to her and hears that she's breathing. And then like he's immediately like, you just see this relief. And then they both run off together and you get like, he brings her out of the apartment with his gun. Cause you got to keep in mind that like that is a huge risk for him. He is supposed to kill her. Like that is his job.
Right.
They do clearly let him go because they show the little thing on the ground that dude left there. So like obviously he knows that's what's going to happen. But like, you know, he's basically saying, fuck it, we're going to run away, dystopian future, whatever the consequences are, we're just going to try and get out of here and make a life for ourselves. And he's doing that potentially knowing she'll be dead in 4 years, you know, if she's a replicant. Mm-hmm. So that to me kind of brings some weight to that. I think the other thing, and I didn't really realize this until I watched it the other night, is he is attacked by Leon and almost dies, like he's about to get killed, and then she kills him with his gun, and like basically she's traumatized by that, and he almost got killed twice that night, so he's traumatized. So I think there's also some like trauma bonding, which makes the relationship complex. Like that is a thing that happens often when people are involved in traumatic events together, or like often one person is traumatizing the other. But it can create these like really intense bonds. And I can see the way this movie plays out that could be something that would have happened. And I guess when it comes to like, you know, is he doing it because he gets something out of it? Like, I think he does, but that's part of every relationship. Like you have to be getting something out of a relationship to be doing it. It can't be 100% selfless. So that's kind of, I guess, a spectrum, but I feel the heart there. Like maybe I'm just sort of imagining it, but I do, it comes across to me as real.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. I hear you. I still don't agree, but I hear you, what you're saying. That makes sense to me.
So we meet Roy for the first time when Roy and Leon show up to a place where this guy makes eyeballs for replicants for a living, and he's pretty menacing. They're just so mean to that guy. So okay, here's the thing about Roy. Yeah, Roy just kills so many people that he totally doesn't have to. Like that's the thing about like he's sympathetic, but also like he didn't need to kill. I can't remember if they actually show him killing this guy. They might not, but I just kind of implied that they killed that guy. Right. And same with JF. And well, okay, I kind of understand why he killed Tyrell. That made sense.
Right. This eyeball scene was so boring. This is when I put eyeball scene. I'm so fucking bored. It went on. It was like so long, and I was like, at this point I was still confused about what was even happening. So again, that probably contributed to it. But this was a boring scene for me.
What happens after that? Okay, so yeah, Deckard ends up going to Leon's apartment looking for clues, and he happens to find like a little snake scale, it turns out to be, this little flake of something. So he goes home and he puts it in his cool computer screen, and then we get about a 30-minute scene of him panning and scanning this photograph.
30 minutes at least. It felt like 6 years of my life. I get it. At the time, it was probably like, whoa, cool. Look at this technology. Look at this cool thing he can do. Wow, what a mystery. Last night, it felt like it just needed to stop a lot sooner than it did.
I disagree. I think that scene should be twice as long. I'm kind of not even kidding when I say that. But that scene, that is the most Blade Runner scene, I think, of this movie. Because it is boring, but I like watching it because it's so moody. You know, it's Deckard in his dark room with a glass of whiskey, cyber future whiskey, in his weird computer thing. And the technology part, like, kind of does, even especially today, actually, like, it would have been interesting. I guess in the 80s, this would have looked futuristic in a certain sense. Like, what it's doing is basically like, you could do this on a computer now and, you know, move the picture around and zoom in and zoom out. It technically has this weird other element that is not real, which is like, you can look at a picture and move the angle of the camera or something. That part makes no sense to me. But today, I love watching it because I love that old CRT TV look, and the rest of them in this movie, everything is a CRT TV, which is beautiful. So that part is there, but really it's the kind of music and the mood and just like everything. And I know nothing is going to happen in that scene. I know he's just going to scan around the picture a bunch of times, but I'm just like, it's the part where Deckard scans the picture for 5 fucking minutes.
All right.
I'm not going to convince you these things are good. I just want to explain. Why.
Yeah, no.
Why I like it.
It's interesting to hear your perspective for sure.
I'm looking at your notes, and you have a line that we should maybe get to, which is, I'm sorry, what the fuck is a unicorn doing here? Would you like me to explain the unicorn?
Yeah, that really threw me off.
Okay, so
explain the unicorn.
The unicorn, this is a theatrical cut, director's cut thing. Like, this is, they added the unicorn back. So This is meant to imply, or I shouldn't say meant to imply, I don't actually know, but heavily understood to imply that Deckard is a replicant. The reason being...
Right, I did read that much, but I need to know exactly the reasoning behind this for sure.
Well, the reason is because of the Gaff thing that I was mentioning earlier. So Gaff is walking around supervising Deckard. Deckard is doing all this work, and he just stands there fucking making origami little, like, horses and stuff like that. So he makes, at the very end of the movie, when he walks out of the apartment with Rachel, and he turns around and he sees on the ground a little origami unicorn. So the implication from that is that what we saw was Deckard's dream. Gaff knows this because he knows Deckard's a replicant, and he knows these dreams that he has, like, because they were implanted. And he's kind of just like fucking, maybe not fucking with them, but he's just whatever. He's being a symbolic movie guy by leaving little origami unicorns around.
I'm going to tell you this right now. As soon as you said Gaff was making origami, everything made sense. Guess what else I missed? I didn't fucking notice for 1 second that Gaff was making origami.
Yeah, he's a fiend for it. He's really good at it.
When the fuck was he making origami?
He does it...
I guess I was really into my noodles because I also missed this completely.
It's kind of subtle, I guess. Like, he's not like, hey, Deckard, I'll be over here making an origami unicorn while you investigate this guy's apartment. He just, like, I think in the apartment scene, you kind of see him tweaking a piece of paper, and then at some point he puts it down, and then the camera just shows a little origami guy standing there for a second.
Note to anyone who's listening to this who hasn't seen this and is still going to see it after listening to this. pay the fuck attention, because I think this all happened when there was a significant like 15 minutes of this where I was super checked out. And I believe that is exactly when they said the replicants only live 4 years. And obviously this is also when the origami, like little sprinkle of plot was thrown in there. Missed it all.
I like how you're super checked out for the first 15 minutes, or for 15 minutes at the beginning of the movie. That is the beginning of the movie.
No, the first scene had the fucking biggest ceiling fan I've ever goddamn seen in my life. It was the size of the whole room. That was the beginning of the movie with what's his nuts.
Leon.
And like then we go on a noodle ride, and then I think some of this started happening.
Blade Runner noodle rides. That guy at the beginning, the other Blade Runner, the one who gets shot, he kind of looks like a mix between Harrison Ford and like a Don Draper-ish kind of guy.
I was thinking the same. He was like a very kind of classically, quote unquote, classically handsome kind of guy. We're smoking again inside in 2019, I guess. I did like that scene. It was very moody, and it really set the tone. Like during that scene, I was hooked. I was like, ooh, what's happening? What is this guy? I kind of like that classic look from the past mixed with a futuristic look. Like I know you and I, not on the podcast, but we talked about Gattaca very briefly the other night. Like I love the way that movie is styled. And this had, obviously a lot of that kind of film noir element mixed with the sci-fi. That was cool, and I really did like that scene. But yeah, I kind of after that and then the noodles, I kind of obviously I just kind of lost interest for a while. Enhance.
So Deckard, he, after using his magic computer, he figures out, hey, there's this woman, I guess I should figure out where she is. Well, he's found a clue as to where he can find one of the missing replicants by tracking down like the maker of the snake and all that kind of stuff. All the animals are artificial for some reason. So they're
right.
They're made in a lab and they've got serial numbers on them. So he goes to this interesting bar where she performs a show, which they imply is very sexual, the snake thing. Like they just say like the forbidden snake that poisoned man or whatever. And then like, I think the crowd even gasps. And like Harrison Ford is like not looking at it.
Is this when he's drinking out of a like plastic margarita cup, like a suburban mother on Cinco de Mayo?
Absolutely.
That was ridiculous. I was like, that was the one design element that made me go, did somebody forget to bring in like the glass that he was supposed to be drinking of, and someone was like, here, use this, and emptied like a thing of M&Ms off craft services and threw it at them.
I think
what a weird detail.
I think that's the right glass for that bar. So I don't know if you noticed, but like, did you notice the kind of outfits, like the way people looked in that place?
No.
So it's weird because it looks kind of like a seedy bar, but everybody is dressed like future posh, like very nice
right,
outfits, and they had like head things and stuff like that. So yeah, what he's drinking there, I think it's a cyber martini. You know what I mean? It's like at some point they figured out it was fancier if you made the glasses kind of like curved like that.
It looks cheap. It looks like something they got at the dollar store.
That could be where it came from. So Harrison Ford chases this nice lady into her dressing room. He gets in under false pretenses by doing a strange voice. Tries to, he's trying to ascertain what her deal is, and she eventually figures it out and books it out of there.
I like how we have to see her showering, blow drying her hair in a very futuristic blow dryer bubble.
That fucking dome thing?
With her hair just, yeah. And then naturally boobs are out.
Yeah. I think it's tasteful though. I actually think like
it's fine. It's just like all the women in this. Look, I won't even get started, but we could have done this without needing to see a woman's breasts. I like that she's like, I don't care. Here are my breasts. Like, this is my body. It's not like she's like, you know, swinging them around and trying to make a show out of it. We do get a little bit of skin from Harrison Ford as well in a moment. So it's not like this is completely unbalanced. But, you know, there's always sci-fi movies. There's always got to be some beautiful woman with her breasts out. It just, I'm just tired of it. Let's just move on.
So I'm assuming you were a big fan of her outfit with the bra and the see-through jacket, the clear plastic jacket that she ran out of there with.
That was wild. I was like, this is the least practical thing she could be wearing on a chase. She's trying to get away. Those boots, I think, really held her up. I think she could have maybe made it out of there if she had more practical shoes on.
What did you think of that whole chase scene and her death?
I mean, I was bored. Not even slightly. I was so bored. I was like, why is she just... I kind of was laughing. She was just blasting through all these glass doors, and the way it was shot was very odd, and I couldn't make sense of it. I was like, okay, let's move on. Like, this whole snake thing, I was like, why are there so many snakes? What's going on? I was kind of lost and confused, but I also didn't care. Again, another scene that was just too long for me. What about you?
I think it's a very...
Tell me why you loved it.
I think it's a very sad scene because, again, like, we don't see a lot of these characters. We don't know a ton about them. We do know that they basically have managed to get onto planet Earth and are like having to work jobs to survive. You know, like I don't think they have any money or anything like that. And basically her grind is some kind of like stripper sex show thing. And basically you see her just kind of flee for her life, you know, like she's running to not die. And then Deckard is, you know, shooting at her with a gun, and just kind of, you know, looking at like what is the motivation, I guess, of the characters, you know, like in her case, just the whole premise of these are just some poor, people trying to live a life, you know, that's really it. I don't know if their plan was to go kill a bunch of people after, but like that really seems to be the driving thing. And then, yeah, like it is really overly dramatic, I guess, the way they show her death. But I think that's kind of like, I think that also is one of the cool things about it, because like he's shooting at her and then she's running through these glass windows, and they actually drop the audio from whatever's happening for the most part, and then just crank up the Vangelis saxophone synthesizer soundtrack as she like, it's an action scene, like it's a chase scene with gunfire, but it just immediately is like, we're just going to play it moody, just everything moody.
Yeah. Okay. I have two things that I need to say about this. The first is that I think you are like, it's super interesting because I think you, coming from a perspective of having seen this movie a lot, you know, once we get to that scene with Roy and Deckard at the end, I think for a first time viewer, that is when you really kind of go, oh, wait, who's good? Who's bad? What is good? What is evil? And so then in retrospect, obviously you're like, oh, this poor woman, although they've set it up like these are kind of robot monsters coming down from space and they've killed a bunch of people and now they're on a mission. So they're set up as threatening. So for somebody like myself watching it for the first time, I wasn't invested in this woman's story. It's not like I'm like, yay, I love watching people die or women die on screen. It's not like I was like rooting him on. I just didn't really care. She didn't seem that important in terms of the story at that point. So I think in retrospect, or like having seen it several times and having an understanding of the themes of the movie and what it's maybe asking us to question, I completely see your perspective and I agree with it. The second point was, oh yeah, there were so many like quote action scenes in this that are not shot like action scenes. I don't even know like what the technical terms are. Like, I know this is jumping ahead, but the scene with Chris where
Pris with the P.
Pris the scene with Pris, where that character like dies, it's a weird scene. It's upsetting. It's weird. It's creepy. It's violent. It's a little bit sexual. It's not shot like an action scene, which makes it more intimate and more human and more raw. And I really did appreciate that about these, like what would typically by maybe a less competent director be very by the book and very formulaic. It wasn't at all in this. So I did appreciate that about the, quote unquote action. Again, I appreciated a lot of this. Did I like it? Nah.
I think that really is the thing about Blade Runner, and this is this was my feeling the first time I saw it. I was like really disappointed because I was expecting a certain thing, and it just kind of was like, I don't know, it had a plot and some stuff happened, but I sort of don't care. It definitely, if you've seen it a bunch of times and you sort of like have the whole picture and understanding, I guess, of the characters and what it is, then I think you can start to see it on a different way. Now, is that a failing of a movie, or if you have to watch it, multiple times to like really appreciate it
right
from the beginning, like if you watch a movie for the first time and none of that stuff, it's not explained to you. You sort of have to get to the end, I think, to feel that way at the beginning.
Yeah.
So let's move on to he kills Zora. Leon shows up. Also, after Zora dies, you see a shot of Leon standing outside, like looking like he just saw her get murdered. And there's another moment earlier when Roy says, like, "Did you get your photographs, your precious photographs?" And he said, "I couldn't. There was someone there." So again, those are more moments that kind of humanize the character. Like, Leon is a bad guy, but like he just saw one of his three other people in the world that understand him die. And then he beats the shit out of Deckard, and Rachel explodes his head with Deckard's gun.
Right.
Deckard. One of the things about Deckard in this movie too is that he's just constantly getting the shit kicked out of him, and he should have died multiple times in the movie, which is like totally on purpose. And I think like part of it too is like Zora basically has him like in a chokehold. She's about to kill him, and then someone walks into the room and he manages to get out. Leon is totally about to kill him, and then Rachel shows up and saves him. And then at the end, with Pris, that scene, she just does something that doesn't make any sense, so he is able to kill her, even though she totally could have killed him before. And then at the end, Roy saves his life. So he sucks at actually not getting killed.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a contrast between this character who's kind of a shit, and then Roy, who's just fighting desperately to stay alive and is this superior being by all accounts, and doesn't get that opportunity. That is interesting. And also, Harrison Ford is the perfect person to play that character. It really struck me while I was watching this that Harrison Ford is such, in many ways, like what I guess you would call like a guy's guy. Like, he's really masculine in many ways, and he seems very kind of salt of the earth, very grounded kind of guy. Like, I think Harrison Ford was like a carpenter for many years or something. And like, he worked with his hands, he did labor before he became an actor. And he really brings that to his roles. His characters are also like, thinking of so many of the characters he's played, like even Han Solo or Indiana Jones. They're all characters who have this incredible sense of vulnerability attached to them as well. And I think Harrison Ford does that so well. Like, they all find themselves in difficult circumstances where it's oftentimes not their masculinity or that thing that they're sort of putting on, or that a lot of people associate Harrison Ford with, that gets them out of those predicaments. It's luck or cleverness or even humor sometimes. So I was just thinking as I was watching this how much I really appreciate that about Harrison Ford. And I think because it's so often seen in his roles, I think that's something that he does bring well, and is not just because of the roles that he's been given, he really plays with that really well. And so there is that a bit of sympathy that's garnered for Deckard, even though I don't think he's a very good guy and I don't really like him. He's still got sympathy for me because of that.
Let's talk about Roy and Pris and JF Sebastian. That's kind of like the next big chunk of the movie is Pris meets kind of, we see how she operates, I guess, like she pretends she's homeless and meets this guy who's 25 years old but looks like he's in his 40s because he's got a degenerative disease, and basically is like, hey, I'm lost, I need help, and
sorry, she slams herself into his vehicle when she first meets him. That was absurd. That was so strange, that moment.
She breaks the window. Yeah, the acting job that Pris is doing is a little bit weird. I mean, she's trying to look like she's scared. Like, oh, you scared me. I'm just this vulnerable thing. You scared me so much I ran and bumped into the car. Like, she's putting on a performance.
Bumped into the car and just smashed it?
Well, she is
it was weird. It was just a weird detail that I think, again, that we didn't need. Continue.
So they hang out for a bit, and then Roy shows up later, and basically, like, they want this guy because he works for Tyrell and he can get them to Tyrell, or well, they think, or maybe he can extend their lives. He can't, but he's their connection to the top, the guy at the top. And what, I don't know. I feel so bad for that dude, JF Sebastian, because like it's just really weird the way it plays out, because clearly Pris is using her femininity and sexuality. Like, she's not like, you know, putting her chest in his face or something like that, Mina from Dracula style. But she, you know, she clearly is sort of like preying upon a certain, you know, instinct or feeling he has. And then Roy shows up and it's like, oh, this is my boyfriend Roy. He's Dutch and really handsome and has a very cool leather jacket. So can you help us out? Yeah, that was a little weird.
Yeah, this is jumping ahead, but like, does JF Sebastian die at the end? Because I also missed that. What happened to him? Okay,
so basically he brings them to the Tyrell Corporation, and then we get the scene where Roy talks to God, right, and kills him. And JF Sebastian is in the room, and then Roy turns around and says, like, "Come here, JF." Like, he basically says, like, "Come here, don't run away." And then rides the elevator down alone. And then in the next scene, they tell Deckard Tyrell was dead, and this other guy was also found dead. So they do explicitly say they found JF Sebastian's body at the scene. Yeah, it's pretty easy to miss.
Yeah.
Over the sound of noodles.
I was done my noodles by that point.
Okay. So what did you think of the scene with Roy and Tyrell? I loved, like, again, the costumes in this movie, like, and the set. Like, he's just this insanely rich guy. He basically is kind of the king of, he can create robots that are people to do labor. Like, I don't know if he's the most powerful guy in the world, but he certainly seems like he's up there. And he's this very old man, which I think is sort of a relevant thematic detail, in this room with 8,000 candles. And he's wearing this, like, incredibly thick, luxurious robe. And then Roy shows up and says, "God, why did you make this world that is so evil? You know, why did you create me with this cruelly short lifespan?" And then he says, you know, but you exist and it's amazing." And Roy goes and squishes his head.
Yeah, that scene was when, things really picked up for me. I guess I never really, I always appreciated Rutger Hauer, but I didn't appreciate him enough. He's, I think, quite brilliant in this movie, to be honest. And I think he plays so many things so well in this scene. It was so creepy and yet so sad, hearing him say, like, "I want more life, Father." He has the best lines in this. I was not expecting him to go in for a mouth kiss and then just smush Daddy's eyes. That genuinely shocked me. And that's when I started caring about things, because I was like, okay, it's on now. Stuff's happening. Stuff really does make sense. I understand the urgency and the stakes here at this point. So from just a plot perspective, I think this is where things really start to come together. But I think it's a really beautiful scene, obviously. I guess someone could argue it's a bit heavy-handed, but I think it's done in a way that it makes sense and I mean, the candles, it's almost like he's walking into a church, right? Like this place that's the sanctuary.
Yeah, like before he puts on the big robe, he is wearing like it's like a white gown. It looks incredibly religious. Like I don't know if it's a priest kind of gown or like a monk or something like that.
Right. Yeah. I love this scene. I think this was one of the best scenes, if not the best scene of the movie for me. And the robot owl also made it cool.
With his
just
reflective eyes.
Random shot. Yeah.
So after this, Deckard gets the news that Tyrell is dead and this other guy is dead. So he goes to JF Sebastian's apartment, and then this is the final act of the movie. So first he sees Pris, and we get a very bizarre fight scene that doesn't make sense. I love this movie. I'll admit what happens here kind of doesn't make sense.
She's an interesting character because she's really strange. Like, Roy is very off-putting. He's very human, but there's something clearly very like off about him. Pris is just straight up kind of weirdo styles this whole time. I think him encountering her in that room of toys was very fitting. I loved that room. I cannot even imagine how long it took to dress that set and to get those actors in there and to get everything just moving exactly right for that scene. Really pretty masterful, I think. Yeah, it's like she's in primo like 80s aerobic style mode in this moment. What an incredibly physically demanding role as well for Daryl Hannah. She's got a lot to do. I really like Daryl Hannah. I think she's great. She also has this sort of childlike quality about her in every role that she plays. She plays out really well, and that really worked here. Like, she's like a creepy doll in this from the moment we meet her. So there are elements of the scene I liked, but yeah, it was sort of like an 80s like pop rock video for a while. And you're right, it didn't really make sense.
Yeah, strategically it's a bit confusing because basically Deckard walks in and she's like hiding in plain sight, looking like a mannequin or something like that, and then she attacks Deckard, and then she has him in some kind of wrestling move that you noted looks very sexual. And I looked up a screenshot because I was trying to get some picture, and I was just like, whoa, like I forgot, because she's also like she's wearing these like skin colored tights. So it just like, definitely looks like that. But she's got him in this crotch lock thing, her legs around his head, and then she like lets him go, runs to the other end of the room, and then does backflips at him, at which point he shoots her. Now, in the beginning, they explain what the different robots do, and she is a basic pleasure model. So, I don't know. Maybe she just didn't know what to do. But yeah,
did not compute. Yeah,
I was very impressed because earlier on, Sebastian says like, "Oh, show me something," and then I remembered the scene where she does this like backflip thing, but I didn't know. I was expecting like, oh yeah, she does the backflip, and I'm like, I bet they're going to cut, and then a stunt double is going to do it. But like, no, she actually just does it. So that's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
So yeah, another example of Deckard being a total fuck up is like he was dead, but she basically lets him go and then gets herself killed. Then Roy shows up and sees her dead body, and it's incredibly sad. It's very sad. And then he chases Deckard for 10 minutes. and I love this part of the movie. Rutger Hauer in his underwear, pretty jacked, just running around,
howling.
Ow, ow!
And when that moment where he goes up to her and she's got like her tongue sticking out when she's dead, and he like puts his mouth on her and like pushes it back in and takes her blood and it's like watching a genius toddler sort of try to figure out what being a human is and what death is. It was very like, I thought that was a really powerful moment where I was invested with Roy's story at this point. And then, the running around in the final showdown was super weird and creepy and kind of exciting and heartbreaking. So good.
Yeah, it's interesting because, like, basically the timing is really serendipitous. Like, this is a movie, so I guess, like, of course, this is how this is going to play out. But, like, basically his last moments of robot life are, upon him, the counter is starting to approach zero, and he's literally saying, like, he's feeling it happen. His hand starts seizing up, and he's like, no, not now. I need more time, and shoves a nail through his hand. Perhaps there's a religious thing there too. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. I was going to ask you, did I miss something here? Because there were so many shots of hands throughout this movie, not just him looking at his hand and going, not yet, not yet. Just shots of hands doing things in general. And then I was very confused about that nail at the end, which like could just be a religious reference, or maybe is that pain boosting his adrenaline, and so that's giving him his final push. I wasn't entirely clear.
I think narratively it's the second thing. Like, it is his hand, because his hand is like literally freezing up on him, and I think he's just like desperately doing something to kind of keep himself alive. And then this whole final scene is basically he's in the process of dying and just, fearing death and all of that. And then he uses his last moments to basically just chase this guy around and make him scared for his life. I don't know if he thought Deckard doesn't appreciate life or something like that, but that's just kind of interesting that those are his final moments, is he's saying, like, like, now you know what it feels like. And then ultimately at the very last second, he's like, no, I'm gonna let this guy live, which I think is interesting.
He delivers a beautiful monologue.
Yep. Very
time for death, powers down.
Very often quoted speech, which Rutger Hauer actually wrote a lot of it. Like, there was an original bunch of text there, and he kept like the ships off Orion or whatever, like the technical detail parts, but the rest of it was him. And it's like, it's perfect and beautiful. And like the delivery is so good. Like, yeah. And it's just,
I cried.
And all those tears were lost, like, whatever.
In the rain.
I fucked that line up, but you know the line.
Yeah, it was really a beautiful moment. And that's also a moment where I went, wait a minute. I think I was just like pissy last night. I should go back and rewatch this, but I was wrong. It was just like the Rutger Hauer stuff was cool for me.
But that's that moment and everything that comes with it. That's kind of what I bring back to the rest of the movie every time I watch it, is like knowing him, knowing what that is, and sort of like kind of applying it to the other characters as well. Even Rachel to an extent, Mm-hmm. And then the Deckard goes home after a long, rough day, and he finds out Rachel is still alive, and they're like, fuck it, we're getting out of here. And then they go off into the sunset. And then the original theatrical cut had actually ended with like footage of like them in a car in the sun somewhere driving off. Like, they literally do drive off into the world. In this version, they just cut to credits, which is the right thing to do.
I read that was actually discarded footage from The Shining.
Yeah, apparently those like overhead shots. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I like this ending because I think before we wrap it, we need to talk about Deckard. Is he a replicant or not?
Yeah.
And I think that now knowing that fucking guy was making origami just makes more sense to me, because I didn't know who left him the origami. So now I'm like, okay. Curious to know what your thoughts are and if you think Deckard is a replicant or not, or what you
I kind of
question or think about it.
Don't care. Like, honestly, like, I guess the question is, like, what are the implications of either possibility?
Yeah.
Like, there's what is the correct outcome, or what is the objective truth of the movie? I think Ridley Scott has said, yes, he's a replicant. But I don't even know if that matters, you know, like, who, like, there's the screenwriter. What did they think? I don't know if the Philip K. Dick novel touches or story touches on this at all. I guess, like, I kind of don't care. I think I like it better. I think I like it better if he's human, though. I think that's more interesting, because if he's human, then he might not even know. That's the thing too. Like, from Deckard's perspective, it's irrelevant too, because, like, if he's a replicant, but, like, he doesn't know. And I think maybe he is questioning it by the end of the film. That's a possibility too, is, like, he never explicitly goes, like, am I a replicant? Maybe there's voice over there where they're like, they introduced that concept. No, I don't think they did. But I could see that experience with Rachel, where she's like, oh my God, my memories aren't real, like, could cause him to wonder the same thing. Like, that's a possibility. Yeah, I think if he's human, I think it's more interesting, because, you know, he is human learning the value of life from these non-human things that are perhaps, like, more human than Deckard, because they appreciate the value of life more. And Rachel also kind of factors into that, because he falls in love with this woman that does not have a long lifespan, and he maybe is throwing his life away to pursue that for whatever it's worth. So I think that is the more interesting ending. If he's a replicant, then it's just kind of, I don't know. I mean, yeah, okay.
Yeah, I actually agree with you completely. And so from everything that I read, it sounds like pretty much everyone else that worked on this, Philip K. Dick, he's human, but Ridley Scott was like, he's a replicant. I think that if we're taking the origami unicorn at face value, he's clearly, like, there. How else does that make sense? Unless the guy's just like, no, it doesn't. There's no other possible way that makes sense, I think. So I think that that's the argument. But I also think that it makes more sense, or it's more meaningful if he is human, for all of the reasons that you just spoke on. Because the stakes, there's really no stakes if he's a replicant. He's dead soon anyway. Who, like, and like you said, he's learning these lessons as a human from these non-humans that are incredibly human things. It just, there's not as much meaning attached to it, I think, if he is a replicant.
Yeah,
I think if he is a replicant, this movie needs to, it's a different movie. It's a different story that we need to care about. If the story is about, is he a replicant, and him realizing that he is, that's a different story. That's a different movie. That might be interesting. But this story, and what this story seems to be saying, it's not as meaningful. It's not as interesting. The stakes aren't as high if he is a replicant.
Yeah, totally. To me, the is Deckard a replicant thing, this is from the early 80s, so it's not the same period of time. But I remember the late 90s, there was sort of a period of time where, like, movies were like, there was a lot of movies with twists. There was Fight Club, there was American Psycho, The Sixth Sense, and every M. Night Shyamalan movie. So, like, I also happened to see Blade Runner maybe a little bit just before then. I've never liked, like, twists are always like, it's a thing where you're like, well, if you know that such and such is true and you watch it again, you can totally see it. And I was like, okay, you know, that can be interesting. That can be boring too. That's kind of how I felt about this one. The whole theory of, like, is he a replicant? I'm like, I don't think that's actually interesting if it is. Like, okay, I guess I can go back and watch the movie, and there are clues because of the clues are really the unicorn. Well, actually, no, there's a few. There's the unicorns. Gaff says at one point, you've done a man's job, I think at the very end, which is a bit of a weird line. Like, that's kind of insinuating something.
Yeah.
So, yeah, whatever. I don't think it's interesting. I think it sucks. I'll tell you, though, with the sequel, I won't spoil the sequel at all, but I will say...
Is that the Villeneuve film with Ryan Gosling?
The Denis Villeneuve one with Ryan Gosling, which is pretty good. I was like, really, oh God, like you're making a sequel to Blade Runner. Like, what are you guys thinking? Think it actually was a pretty darn good movie. It's not the same as this one. Like, it's more... Yeah. It's a little bit more of a conventional... sci-fi action movie. It's a Denis Villeneuve movie, which if you like Denis Villeneuve is a good thing. I do. So I
love him.
I loved it. Yeah, it's definitely got his whole fucking style all over it. But in that one, they established within the first fucking 3 minutes of the movie that Ryan Gosling, the Deckard equivalent, is in fact a replicant. That Blade Runners in the future are replicants. And similarly, he just kind of gets the shit kicked out of him the whole movie, and people treat him like shit. And like literally the opening scene, or one of the opening scenes, he's like walking through the police department kind of hallway, and all the actual human cops are just like bumping into him and calling him a skin job and stuff like that. Like it's pretty interesting what they did there. And then I think they don't necessarily answer the question in the sequel too about Deckard specifically. I think you can still go with either option and the movie makes sense. It's been a while. I only saw it once though, so I don't 100% remember the details around that, but yeah.
Yeah.
So that's Blade Runner. I'm just looking if there's any other details I wanted to talk about. So I wanted to just focus on the or make sure I've addressed all of the outfits in this movie. So we got Rachel with her big jackets. We talked about that. Roy's outfit, he's got a dope leather jacket. I like when he's walking around without the jacket on because he's got his pants hiked up to like his chest. Like it's a really strange look what he's got going on there, but it's cool. And Deckard. So Deckard looks like a friggin' detective. Like that's how he's dressed. So he's got like a big duster, but then his outfit underneath the duster is really weird. You don't notice it because this movie is like dark all the time. Like I think even when it's daytime in this movie, you see sunlight kind of getting into the scene a little bit, but it's still like friggin' dark. So his outfit underneath, he's got like this brown suit jacket, and then he's got a long sleeve shirt that is like striped in a weird way. Like it's green and burgundy and has these like horizontal stripes. So I sent you a picture of that earlier. Did you recognize that as his shirt from the movie?
No, I was like, what? I thought you accidentally sent me images of like, I don't know why you would be sending somebody else images of a shirt. But I was like, oh, this is a mistake. He meant to send this to somebody else. And then you said, I'll explain later. This
ugly ass shirt I found that I'm going to buy. I honestly didn't notice this until like one year I was like, oh, maybe for Halloween, I'll dress as Deckard. And I was like, okay, he's got a trench coat. And then what does he wear underneath? And I'm like, oh, I'm sure it's just like a white shirt and a black tie. And then I looked at the movie and I was like, what fucking shirt? What is he wearing? And then I finally got like you get one good shot when he's in his kitchen after the scene where Rachel kills Leon, and I was like, what in the fuck is that? So yeah, I sent you a picture of the shirt, and I also sent a picture of the 1999 era Phoenix Coyotes hockey team jersey because I think they're kind of the same. I think aesthetically they're around the same level. Alana, are there any other points you wanted to bring up about Blade Runner? Any last thoughts?
No, I think that this is a movie I will be thinking about for a little while, which I think is good. I think that ultimately that means it is a good movie. I think objectively, obviously, this is a good movie. I think it's incredibly influential. I'm glad I finally saw it. I think this is an important film in terms of like just film history and where it has been and where it has come to. I can't even I think anyone who hasn't seen this, I realize I always say, like, if you haven't seen this, who the fuck is listening to this if they haven't seen the movies and we just talk about the entire movie? But if people haven't seen it, I do think it's an important movie to watch. Just don't watch it when you're tired. I also think usually I do some stupid fucking rating. I can't even do that. I don't know how I feel about this movie. I feel as ambiguous about this movie as like I feel about the question of is Deckard a replicant? Like I don't know. I think I kind of know how I feel, but like also it doesn't make sense to say how I feel.
You're not qualified to have an opinion on Blade Runner yet until you watch it at least like 5 more times.
I feel like that is the case. I understand why people lose their minds over this. It surprises me a bit because it is not a conventional sci-fi action, and it's not a conventional movie in any sense. And it kind of makes me sad that we don't see more films like this, big budget movies like this, because it clearly works. People are clearly really attached to this movie. I think it's brilliant on many levels. But yeah, I can't even begin to say like how I really feel. I've only scratched the surface of Blade Runner.
Well, I've made it abundantly clear that I love this movie. I'll easily give it 10 ugly Deckard shirts out of 10. If anyone knows where I can get one of those shirts, please let me know, because I would totally buy it. I think it's... I totally understand why it's why people see it and are underwhelmed. I think in some cases it's people expect an action movie, especially around the time it came out. You would have been like, oh, Han Solo in a science fiction movie. Great. I'm going to go watch that. Because that poster looks fucking awesome. That original Blade Runner poster looks so cool.
Yeah.
I do, and it's kind of like a weak excuse to be like, well, if you watch the movie a bunch of times, you start to realize it's good. But I think that is kind of true with this movie. I think it really helps to have seen it once and know exactly what it is, just to set expectations, to know that like, okay, it's going to be kind of boring for the first half, so I can just sort of expect that. And then knowing the characters and sort of where their ultimate journey goes and that sort of thing, I think makes you look back on earlier scenes, just look at them differently. Because the first time I saw it, the scene where Zora runs away and he kills her, it kind of is like whatever. But you watch it again and you see there's these shots of him trying to find her, and they keep cutting to her in a crowd, looking scared, like hiding. And that gives it a lot more weight. So it is, a movie that does benefit from repeated viewings. I mean, I would say if you watch this 3 times and you're like, I don't like it, then you don't like Blade Runner, and obviously, whatever people's tastes are fine. You're not a bad person if you don't like Blade Runner. Well, I don't know. Anyway, go watch Blade Runner.
Yeah, go watch it. I think it's an interesting study at the very least. Does a great movie require multiple viewings to really appreciate it or enjoy it? Like I said, I appreciated it. I don't know how much I enjoyed it. It's interesting.
The soundtrack is well worth listening to on its own.
If you're into that kind of thing, I would argue boring, snooze fest.
It is, though. It totally is, but it's like really good at that. I throw it on when I go to bed sometimes. Like I'll just throw the Blade Runner soundtrack on. It's perfect.
I do have an extra note. We're like trying to say goodbye, but I have a note.
Bring it.
The reason I think the bare breasts frustrated me was because that scene was cut with, as well as like the rapey scene, there's a lot of like saxophone that sort of implies some sexual,
smoky,
like,
romantic saxophone.
Yeah, exactly. So that layered on top of those scenes, obviously the music is going to influence that. I thought the sound design was interesting. I always like whoever Ridley Scott works with and whatever he does, sound design is always incredibly important in his films. Clearly, it's a huge factor in setting the mood and setting the tone. And it's got its unique sort of flavor. It really, really helps create the world. But like when you're putting some, smoky saxophone on top of those scenes with those women, that there is a certain implication. And that was part of what sort of made me question those scenes and for many reasons, not just like, hey, women don't always need to show their boobies. Like it's just, I think that adds a layer of intent in terms of filmmakers' perspective on some of those scenes and what they're really there to do or what they're saying.
Yeah, I think in the case of the Rachel Deckard scene, it's romantic sounding music, and I think that's pretty explicit. Like, it is kind of meant to be played. It's supposed to be a romantic scene, even if it's a little bit rapey. Like, that's...
I mean, like, I was very confused watching that scene. I was like, I'm kind of like warm right now, but also this is not, I shouldn't be.
Harrison Ford was just teaching a robot to love.
All right.
Listen to the soundtrack, have a nap. Don't listen to it while you're driving. It's a dangerous idea. All right, folks. Thank you for sticking this one out. Thank you for listening to Jason Mansplains Blade Runner to Ilana. Hopefully, if you didn't like this podcast, please just listen to it 3 more times, and I swear it'll all make sense. That's going to be it for this week. We'd really appreciate it if you could take the time to leave us a review on iTunes or any other podcast platform. You can find us on Facebook and Instagram at xpostwatcho. You can send us an email at xpostwatcho@gmail.com. And we'll be back next week to watch what I'm sure will eclipse Blade Runner in quality, which is The Faculty. So we'll be back next week to talk about that.